Letter 8. My dear Wormwood, so you have great hopes that the patient's religious phase is dying away, have you? I always thought the training college had gone to pieces since they put old Slubgob at the head of it, and now I am sure. Has no one ever told you about the law of undulation? We have another mention here of another devil named Slubgob that is apparently in charge of training. And apparently, the last letter that Wormwood wrote to Screwtape was full of optimism. And here, Screwtape is going to shoot down Wormwood's optimism, which is interesting because is he doing it? What is his purpose behind it? Is it because he's a devil and they don't understand the concept of optimism or hope? Humans are amphibians, half spirit, half animal. The enemy's determination to produce such a revolting hybrid was one of the things that determined our father to withdraw his support from him. This is a reference to what happened to Lucifer. We have references in Ezekiel and Isaiah, and so this is just a very broad reference to what happened according to the Bible. As spirits, they belong to the eternal world, but as animals, they inhabit time. This means that while their spirit can be directed to an eternal object, their bodies, passions, and imaginations are in continual change, for to be in time means to change. Their nearest approach to constancy, therefore, is undulation, the repeated return to a level from which they repeatedly fall back, a series of troughs and peaks. A trough would be a low point. So we bounce back as humans between high points and low points in our lives. We are part of two worlds. Like we have the spiritual world, we have the physical world. We have times of dissatisfaction, we have times of satisfaction, and rarely do we just stay in one of those camps. We bounce back and forth usually. If you had watched your patient carefully, you would have seen this undulation in every department of his life. His interest in his work, his affection for his friends, his physical appetites all go up and down. As long as he lives on earth, periods of emotional and bodily richness and liveliness will alternate with periods of numbness and poverty. The dryness and dullness through which your patient is now going are not, as you finally suppose, your workmanship. They are merely a natural phenomenon which will do us no good unless you make a good use of it. To decide what the best use of it is, you must ask what use the enemy wants to make of it, and then do the opposite. Now, it may surprise you to learn that in his efforts to get permanent possession of a soul, he relies on the troughs even more than on the peaks. Some of his special favorites have gone through longer and deeper troughs than anyone else. So this is interesting that they say that God relies on our low points sometimes in life. And if you think about low points that you've been through, what has helped you get through them? The reason is this. To us, a human is primarily food. Our aim is the absorption of its will into ours, the increase of our own area of selfhood at its expense. But the obedience which the enemy demands of men is quite a different thing. One must face the fact that all the talk about his love for men and his service being perfect freedom is not, as one would gladly believe, mere propaganda, but an appalling truth. Look at what Screwtape says is the truth in these lines. One must face the fact that all the talk about his love for men and his service being perfect freedom is an appalling truth. So he recognizes that as truth. He really does want to fill the universe with a lot of loathsome little replicas of himself, creatures whose life on its miniature scale will be qualitatively like his own, not because he has absorbed them, but because their wills freely conform to his. We want cattle who can finally become food. He wants servants who can finally become sons. It's very interesting here how much Screwtape is revealing to Wormwood about what the Lord wants. I mean, look what he says God wants. Or rather, let's start with what the devils want. He says the devils want cattle who can finally become food. He, God, wants servants who can finally become sons. We want to suck in. He wants to give out. We are empty and would be filled. He is full and flows over. Our war aim is a world in which our Father below has drawn all other beings into himself. The enemy wants a world full of beings united to him, but still distinct. And that is where the troughs come in, the low points come in. You must have often wondered why the enemy does not make more use of his power to be sensibly present to human souls in any degree he chooses and at any moment. But now you see that the irresistible and the indisputable are the two weapons which the very nature of his scheme forbids him to use, merely to override a human will, as his felt presence in any but the faintest and most mitigated degree would certainly do, would be for him useless. He cannot ravish, he can only woo, for his ignoble idea is to eat the cake and have it. The creatures are to be one with him, but yet themselves, merely to cancel them or assimilate them, will not serve. He is prepared to do a little overriding at the beginning. He will set them off with communications of his presence, which, though faint, seem great to them, with emotional sweetness and easy conquest over temptation. But he never allows this state of affairs to last long. Sooner or later he withdraws, if not in fact, at least from their conscious experience, all those supports and incentives. He leaves the creature to stand up on its own legs, to carry out from the will alone duties which have lost all relish. It is during such trough periods, such low periods, much more than during the peak periods, that it is growing into the sort of creature he wants it to be. Let me read you that sentence again. It is during such trough periods, low points, okay, much more than during the peak periods, that it is growing into the sort of creature he wants it to be. Hence, the prayers offered in the state of dryness are those which please him best. We can drag our patients along by continual tempting, because we design them only for the table, and the more their will is interfered with, the better. He cannot tempt to virtue as we do to vice. He wants them to learn to walk and must therefore take away his hand. And if only the will to walk is really there, he is pleased even with their stumbles. Read that line. He wants them to learn to walk and must therefore take away his hand. And if only the will to walk is really there, he is pleased even with their stumbles. Do not be deceived, Wormwood. Our cause is never more in danger than when a human, no longer desiring, but still intending to do our enemy's will, looks round upon a universe from which every trace of him seems to have vanished, and asks why he has been forsaken, and still obeys. Okay, so that's one of my favorite parts of this book, I think. I enjoy those lines, and I really enjoy thinking about them. And so I encourage you to kind of pause and think about what C.S. Lewis is saying in these lines. Let me read you that sentence one more time, though. Our cause is never more in danger than when a human, no longer desiring, but still intending to do our enemy's will, looks round upon a universe from which every trace of him seems to have vanished, and asks why he has been forsaken, and still obeys. But of course, the troughs afford opportunities to our side also. Next week, I'll give you some hints on how to exploit them. Your affectionate uncle, Screwtape.